Welcome to Test Prep Central. We're on calculator workshop number 9, evaluate functions. For example 1, we're asked to evaluate f of x equals -2 times the quantity x minus 1 squared plus 8 using a domain of -2, 0, 1, and 3. Start by typing your function in the function grapher. I'm going to clear my memory so I can start with a clean calculator. Type y equals, input -2, open parentheses, x minus 1, close parentheses, squared, plus 8. We're going to go to the home screen to evaluate this function, so second mode will take you out. Input the first number in the domain in the function here on the home screen. And the way we do that is we type VARS, which stands for variables. We arrow right to Y variables. We type 1, 1, and it will put Y1 on your home screen. You open parentheses, and you put your first element of your domain in the parentheses. So -2 is the first one listed. Close your parentheses or not. It will work even if you don't close them. And then type enter. So this is your -10, which is going to be an element of your range. Now to do the next one, you can go through the same process again, but there's a shortcut. And this is called retyping. So you will type second enter, and it will retype what you just typed. Use your back arrow to go over and change your -2 into a 0. So I'm going to put a 0 here and then delete to have the 0 in my parentheses. And then type enter, and the output is 6. And then I repeat the process, second enter, change my 0 into a 1, and then hit enter. And then last one, second enter, change my 1 into a 3, and then enter. As you can see, this is a quick and easy way to evaluate a function at multiple elements of the domain. So a nice strategy to know when you're working problems on a high stakes test. This might give you a few more minutes to work some other problem that may be more challenging. All right, on example number 2, we're to use the graph of the function to evaluate. So the function is f of x equals 1 over the quantity x minus 1 plus x. So first I'm going to clear my screen here and go to my y equals and clear the equation that's already in here. To do the fraction, I'm going to do alpha y equals enter. On the older model calculators, you may know we use this quite a bit, but if you're in an older model calculator, you don't have this option. Just use division, but be sure to put your x minus 1 in parentheses if you're dividing 1 by x minus 1. So pretty much all the things you can do in these newer calculators, there's ways to get them done in the older calculator with just slight modification. All right, so we have our function typed. So now we're going to go to the graph. Now it says in your handout to graph the function in a standard viewing window. So that's Zoom 6. If you've cleared your memory, that standard viewing window is already there. Now you'll notice I don't see any grid lines on my graph. That's because I cleared my memory and my grid, which was on, was turned off. So let's turn on the grid lines by going to second zoom and go down to the third row and over all the way to the right and press enter and highlight that word grid line. Now when you press graph, it will show you the graph again, but with grid lines. Now those are totally optional in this case, but I usually leave them on when I'm doing any graph analysis. It just kind of helps me estimate numbers and points with ease. All right, now we're going to trace the values that we're looking for. These are the numbers in the parentheses. F -1 means the x value is -1. So type trace, and then the negative, not the minus sign, but the negative underneath 3, and then the 1. And you'll see x equals -1 at the bottom. When you press enter, the Y value is your output. In the older model calculators, this will be displayed as a decimal, but since we've used the function grapher with the fraction, they're displaying the Y output as a fraction. For some reason, it's not always a fraction. I've seen some that come out a decimal even though you put it in as a fraction. So I guess it's kind of a random thing, but mostly they'll give you fractions if you input with the alpha y equals enter. All right, so now to do the next value, I don't have to type trace again. I can just type the value of x. So the next value of x is 0. Type 0, enter. And notice the y is equal to -1. That is my output. So that would be my range, part of my range. All right, the next one is the fraction. Now, if you have the older model calculator, you will type 1 divided by 2, but we actually have the option to do alpha y equals enter here. So I'm going to do that. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe we don't. Okay, mine's not working. I think the emulator doesn't have it, but my actual calculator does have this. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the old-fashioned model, which is 1 divided by 2. Yeah, and you see how that's in decimal form. So in the older calculators, you only have this option. In the newer calculators, this one I'm showing you does not have this, but my actual calculator with the most recent operating system is allowing me to use alpha y equals here. So that's a new feature. You may not even have it on yours. All right, let's go on to the next one, the final one, which is 2. So I'm going to type the 2 and enter. And there's the output of 3. So there we have our results, and I've written each of those in function notation. F of -1 is equal to -3/2. F of 0 is equal to -1. F of 1/2 is equal to -1.5. I went ahead and used the fraction since the fraction was given in the original problem. And then F of 2 is equal to 2. Now let me go back and show you one other thing. This is not in your handout, but let's say you do have an older model calculator, like even a TI-83, and you're evaluating F of 1/2. I'm going to go ahead and put the 1 divided by 2 in here and see these decimal numbers. Well, when you go out of your graph, so you can hit clear or you can do second mode to go out. When you type X, it will give you that value of X, and you can do math, enter, and convert it to the fraction. And you can also type alpha 1, enter. That'll be your Y. It'll show you the Y value, and then you can convert it, math, enter. Now it is giving it as an improper fraction, and in the handout I wrote a mixed number, but both would be equally acceptable. So you could put -3/2 instead of the -1 and 1/2. All right, let's move on to example 3. It says to complete the table for the function. So the first step, as always, is to type the function into y equals. So I'm going to clear this screen, and I'm going to go to the y equals and clear this function and put in the new one. So the negative is underneath your 3, then the 2. Absolute value is math num 1. Inside the symbols, we need the x plus 3. And then outside the symbol is the plus 4x. Okay, so this is really similar to our first example. So we're going to go to our table, and we're going to take the values of x and put them into list 1. So if you will go to stat, enter, this is your list, not your table, but your list. Type the values that you see in the table in your list 1. So the first number was -3, and then 0, and then 0.5, 1, 2.5, and 4. Okay, so I've got all my numbers in my list. The next step is to highlight list 2. So we're going to go to y equals. Not yet. Go to list 2. Highlight list 2. Now, what we would like to do is take the function that we've typed into y equals and evaluate that function for the values of x that we typed in list 1. Now, this is a very valuable skill when you're analyzing regression equations. So later on, we're going to be using this quite a bit when we're doing residuals. You can use this as well. So this is a really handy skill to know because it saves you a lot of time. All right, so I'm going to evaluate my function at these values, and here's how you do it. You type the VARS button, which stands for variables. Go right to y variables and type 1, 1. And at the bottom of your calculator screen, you will see the y1. Now open parentheses and evaluate this function at list 1. So you will type second 1 for list 1. And close your parentheses or not. I usually go ahead and close them because it looks better. And then when you press enter, it will evaluate that function at all these values and put the outputs in list 2. And then you simply complete your table now. You just copy those into the table if you're given one. So very quick, very easy way to evaluate a list. Evaluate a function with a list of x values. All right, example 4, it says to find the following values using f of x and g of x. Now, if you're in Algebra 1, you've probably never seen these, but in Algebra 2 and in other advanced math courses, we have what are called composite functions, which is like a function inside of a function. So even if you've never done this or even never seen this, it's actually not any more challenging than just plugging a number into a function. So we're going to go ahead and do this. The step 1, of course, is to get these functions into your y equals. So I'm going to go back to my y equals and clear the function that is here. And in the first one, y1, I will type the function 2 to the x power. All right, go down 1 to y2, and we're going to put g of x. So that is 3 minus, not the negative at the bottom, but the minus 2x. And now let's go to the home screen. So we'll type second mode. Now to evaluate f of 0, we simply type variables, y variables, 1, 1, because f was typed in the first row in our function grapher, so it's in y1. To evaluate, you simply put the 0 in parentheses next to that, and you type enter, and it will evaluate the function. So we're getting a value of 1. Okay, now we're going to evaluate y2 because the next one says g of 1. So we'll do the same button, variables, and the same y variables, and the same 1, but here's where it's different. Don't choose 1, choose 2, because g of x was in 2, y2. Open your parentheses and put in your value of x, which is your 1, and press enter, and there's your output. It just happens to be a 1 again. Okay, the next one is the one I was talking about earlier. This is called a composite function. So it says find f of g of 0. So we're going to start with y1 because that's the function f. So type variables, y variables, 1, 1, and that's like your f function, your f of x. Then you're going to open parentheses, and you're going to put in your g function, which we put in y2. So that's variables, y variables, 1, 2. Okay, and then you're going to open parentheses and evaluate that at 0. So put a 0 in the parentheses. And then notice you need to close the parentheses twice. So the 0 is going to be evaluated in function g of x, and then once that's evaluated, that number, that output, we will evaluate f of x at that output. And this does it all at once, of course. So when you type enter, you're going to get 8. And now we're going to do it the other way. We're supposed to, for the last one, find g of f of negative 1. So we're going to start with y2. So let's go to variables, y variables, 1, 2. That's g of x. Now open parentheses and let's put in f of x. That's going to be at y1. So variables, y variables, 1, 1. And then in the parentheses next, we're going to put the value of x that we're using to evaluate f of x. So put in a -1. Use the negative under your 3. Be sure to close your parentheses twice. So we're going to evaluate f of x at the -1, and then this answer, whatever it is, it will plug it into g of x, and then it will give us the final output. So let's type enter and see what that is, and that answer is 2. So as you can see, even though that's considered an Algebra 2 or a more advanced topic, it's actually not any more challenging. It's just a matter of typing it out to get the result. Okay, so for this packet, we've learned how to use the home screen to evaluate a function using y1, y2, and of course you could use any of the y3 and so on. So that's an easy, nice thing to know. We've also learned to evaluate functions by using the trace. So trace and then the x value will evaluate the function on a graph. And then finally, you can also evaluate in a table and or in a list, and we filled the whole list in just a matter of seconds. So that's really a nice tool to have when you're doing some more challenging regression equations and evaluating those at different values of x. Don't forget that the best way to learn the calculator is to practice the calculator. So until we meet again, practice, practice, practice.